Today's episode is sponsored by DnF Duel. The fan-favorite RPG series loved the world over for the last 17 years is now the hottest new 2.5D fighting game. Arc System Works and 18 have taken the combat mechanics of Dungeon Fighter Online, transplanted them into a 1v1 environment with Smash-style special move inputs, and implemented rollback netcode for seamless online play, which will be important when all the supers and associated special effects start popping off. Coming to life with a vibrant cel-shaded aesthetic, DnF Duel also offers story, practice, survival, gallery, glossary, and the traditional arcade modes, all available day one at launch, so there'll be plenty to chew through as you master the Berserker, Grappler, Striker, and Hitman, among others. It's available right now on Steam, PS4, and PS5. Thanks again so much to DnF Duel for the sponsor, and without further ado, let's start the show. Hello and welcome back to another installment of What Happened, the investigative pop culture media show that you need to be 99 years or older to watch. On today's episode, we'll be tackling the revered Dead or Alive franchise and its less than revered 6th mainline entry, which as of right now, seems like it's going to be the last one for a long while. But why exactly is that? DOA 5 seemed to put the franchise back on the map, which was bolstered by the heaving, voluptuous amount of DLC content and balance patches that lasted for nearly 5 years. In fact, when Koei Tecmo, whom I will henceforth be addressing only as Tecmo, ended full support for DOA 5, its expansions, and the free-to-play version, it had topped out at 12 million downloads overall, which, even if you consider the fact that a sizable percentage of that 12 million might have made zero money for the publisher, it's still an impressive number nonetheless. Dead or Alive 6, however, seemed to put a sudden stop to all that success and momentum from the very second it was announced, all the way until Tecmo pulled its plug, which wasn't long after, mind you.
I got whooped pretty good.
So put on your best ninja outfit or swimsuit or schoolgirl uniform or S&M bondage gear or sexy Christmas garb or idol costumes or whatever gets you off.
There were a few things that turned me on, dudes.
Because it's time to find out what happened to Dead or Alive 6.
Get ready, fight!
It's 2017 and Dead or Alive 5 Last Round is still getting DLC content in the form of what else? Costumes. It's around this same time that Team Ninja and the producer/director of the majority of the DOA series, Yohei Shimbori, started work on a full follow-up, with the main focus to double down hard on what worked in DOA 5. What worked is obviously the DLC-heavy model in conjunction with the free-to-play version. What didn't work was despite the tagline claim of, "I'm a fighter." Not many hardcore fight fans outside of the DOA verse believed it.
Yeah, that looks good.
The gameplay changes seen in 5 were welcome, but the series still couldn't break away from the notion it didn't have a strong competitive focus or compelling mechanics in the eyes of outsiders. This was something Shimbori and his team wanted to change, but they didn't have a lot of time to do so. Development started in earnest around December of 2017, just as the last few costumes for Last Round were rolling out. The team imported a lot of those same DOA 5 assets, the models, costumes, and mechanics, over into a newer engine, which would allow them to add realistic damage, dirt, and sweat effects to the roster of fighters, which, outside of a few slight changes, was going to remain almost identical. This was meant from the very beginning to be a very iterative sequel, adding some new moves and a minimal amount of fresh characters. They were not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but were trying to change the perception of DOA, which, as it turns out, was going to be a hell of a lot harder. A mere 6 months later, in June of 2018, Tecmo premiered a debut gameplay trailer for DOA 6 that showed off the graphical advances, which were honestly a little hard to notice since so many elements were lifted from DOA 5, but fans noticed something else a lot quicker. The game's costume design and tone were decidedly different. The trailer was trying to frame DOA as a serious, high-intensity martial arts competition. No flirtatious win poses, scandalous costumes, or over-the-top stages. In its place were blood effects, brutal slow-motion attacks, and overall a more serious atmosphere. DOA fans, of course, pointed out that the series' MC, Kasumi, was now wearing more clothing than anyone else in recorded history, apparently. While this sleek full leather number wouldn't look out of place in most modern fighting games, it absolutely did in DOA. Despite this backlash though, Tecmo and Team Ninja just kinda powered through it. Later that same summer, they released another trailer just in time for EVO, and it's here where they did the unthinkable, only highlighting 2 male fighters.
And this is worse than the apocalypse.
That would be Rig from DOA 5 and newcomer Diego. Fans again picked up on this, as the previous trailer only featured Kasumi and Helena to represent the ladies. When Team Ninja finally started to do the interview circuit, you can imagine what the majority of the questions were about. In an interview with GameSpot, for example, Shimbori explained that they were adjusting the game to be a better fit for the burgeoning esports scene, which fighting games have always historically struggled to break into. What that meant, much to fans' ire, is that the usually silly and sexy appeal of the franchise was going to be de-emphasized just a tiny bit. If you want your fighting game to get highlighted on ESPN2 or the front page of Twitch, whatever, you probably don't want 2 bunny-eared leather-clad milkmaids jiggling all over the screen. Now, obviously, this should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Hardcore DOA fans were having absolutely fucking none of this. Now, here's where things get a little messy. Fast forward a month or so to around that year's Tokyo Game Show, where DualShockers held an interview with Shimbori, who tried his best to explain the various miscommunications from earlier that summer. Turns out the more serious trailers and the change in attire was not in fact an indication that the sexy, silly tone and exaggerated memory movements were being toned down at all. Oh, heavens to Betsy, no. It's just that those elements simply weren't ready yet.
Don't be so impatient.
With E3 and EVO, we showed probably the more serious trailers that we had. At that time, we were still right in the middle of working on the new physics and on the engine, so we were very limited in what we're actually able to show. Due to that, we opted to showcase the newer elements of the game, and the first couple of trailers were really focused on that new engine that we have and the new realistic aspects of it. Yet, the Dead or Alive series itself is a lot more colorful and flashier. It's a lot more DOA-like now. He maintained that the team were striving for realism in certain areas, because, obviously not the areas with the dinosaurs, I guess, but with things like fabrics and gravity. He then broke down in detail how the engine upgrade inspired them to add smaller touches, such as the fact that a tight padded leather garment or otherwise supportive top would keep certain parts of the female anatomy pretty stationary, but that the more flowing and airy costumes would have the opposite effect. With this current build now, it's probably only 70% implemented into the way it's going to be in the end. It's not something that we're trying to put in people's faces. Oh, look at the breast movements or anything. However, it is an element of the game that fans of the series do tend to be geared toward. We're working within our fan expectations, and we do want to dispel any rumors that there is no movement whatsoever. That's been a misunderstanding. Dead or Alive fans simply weren't buying it though, and kept piling on the social media pressure, as it was pretty clear, despite Shimbori's assurances, that they were unabashedly targeting a more mainstream market this time around.
Oh, it can't be.
In an article on Eurogamer, some choice quotes of Shimbori were highlighted, quotes that dated back to the reveal event from earlier in the year. When asked about the serious tone and the tougher looking characters, Shimbori stated that it was so everyone can play without being embarrassed, and to avoid the silliness. In fact, the topic of the game's more risque nature seemed to be one that the director was rather tired of, even at this early stage. In a direct answer to Eurogamer's questions, for example, he stated, "I blame it on DOA Extreme, but the fact is, we are trying to build a good fighting game with a challenging system. We put a lot of effort into the tutorials and the quest mode to make it accessible for beginners. We are honoring the long-term fans and making sure they also get what they expect. We would really appreciate it if the media would focus more on the topic of, we are building a good game here, and not only focusing on this jiggle talk." Oh my god, can we please get jiggle talk trending, please? Can we do that? So, obviously by now, with all this mixed messaging, we can see that Tecmo was scared of losing their core fanbase, the ones that needed their Lei Fangs, Christies, and Honkers to remain exactly as they were. We've seen issues like this before in previous episodes. The problem when trying to appeal to everyone is that you often wind up appealing to no one.
And fighting to get it back.
And this is going to be a lingering issue with DOA 6 for pretty much the rest of its lifespan, so we're going to circle back around on this. But for now, let's focus on another aspect that Team Ninja and Tecmo were making a big deal out of, that, much like most decisions made on this project, were a mistake.
Ever heard of Dead or Alive?
By the time DOA 6 was being developed, plenty of other franchises like Mortal Kombat and Tekken had already begun offering more meaty single-player stories.
What's that, Samsung? Bitch, don't nobody want that weak ass shit.
Shimbori stated that they had looked at the mistakes of their competitors and that they were taking steps to avoid said mistakes. There's many different kinds of fans for fighting games. Some play it for the story, some play it for esports. We saw that when Street Fighter V came out, it didn't have a story mode, and there was a lot of controversy around that. Once we saw that, we knew people really wanted a story mode in their fighting games.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they decided to add a cinematic story mode, which was yeah.
I have to go find Honoka! Don't get in my way!
As for any other additional modes and content, well, they were pretty bare bones, with their only real purpose to facilitate grinding, because if people thought DOA 5's unlocks and DLC were obnoxious and predatory, well, they hadn't seen anything yet. DOA 6 was scheduled to come out on February 15th, 2019, which is an aggressive production schedule at best. As it turns out though, it would not make that initial date, as it then received a very slight, very last minute delay to March 1st. Now, the public statement from Tecmo was that Team Ninja needed the extra time to make it a smoother experience, but that's usually, but not always, code for, we found a really bad bug, let's just delay to next month. That, or they just wanted to avoid competition from Bandai Namco's fan-favorite fighter, Jump Force.
No, that's not how I see it. I don't believe that.
So, when DOA 6 launched, neither camp was really that interested in picking it up for a variety of reasons. Despite the changes made to the fighting system, it was still viewed as a simplistic game by the people Tecmo and Team Ninja were trying to reach, and all the costume changes in the world weren't going to change that. Hardcore fans, on the other hand, felt slighted that the elements they loved were being shoved in a dark, pervy corner. When you start up the game, it becomes pretty apparent what Tecmo and Team Ninja had attempted to do here. They had it so that the more conservative costumes were the defaults, while making the more revealing ones much harder to get. This ensured that in tournament play, those same defaults would see the most usage, while the sexier options were buried under prerequisites or behind paywalls, so trying to unlock them for use wouldn't fly in a tournament setting. On top of that, the grindy nature of having to unlock individual costume parts, along with shoving two characters, one being the previously standard Neo Tengu, behind both pre-order and deluxe edition prisons, well, the complaints and gripes were coming fast and hard.
Phrasing.
Obviously!
All of this resulted in reviews also being lukewarm, with many citing the story mode as an absolutely abysmal disaster.
I'm so sorry. Are you okay?
But on top of that were the season passes. These included costumes and not much else, and were more expensive than the base game, sometimes being sold for as high as $90 before taxes, which is some gonzo bazonga shit. While not confirmed, Tecmo probably did this to make up for the game's lack of sales success. During its first month across all 3 platforms it released on, DOA 6 only moved 350,000 copies, and 9 months later, in December of 2019, had only amassed 2 million downloads, which included the free-to-play versions. Nothing, however, is a more pure, unadulterated example of squeezing every drop of blood from a stone than the hair color DLC. For those that don't remember, and I envy you, Tecmo and Team Ninja instituted a new in-game currency called Platinum Tickets, which could only be bought with real-world money. You would then use your itchy and scratchy bucks to change a character's hair color, which would cost you roughly $1 per color. But that ain't the worst of it. They made it so that if you wanted to go back to a previous color you had already purchased, it would charge you again. This wasn't a bug, mind you. They designed it this way. The backlash against this feature was so massive that it caused Tecmo to just run it back. They ditched the entire system, letting people choose any hair color they wanted, and refunded anyone who had purchased them through the Platinum tickets. And really, that marks the end of Dead or Alive 6, because Tecmo and Team Ninja just stopped supporting it only a month after the hair color debacle. This meant it received just slightly more than 1 year of support, which is just wow. Then, almost exactly a year later in 2021, Shimbori suddenly announced his departure from Tecmo in a brief tweet. After that, his social media went dark and hasn't reappeared since. My guess? A permanent vacation on Zack Island. Finally, in May of this year, a supposed Team Ninja employee named Hiroaki Morita admitted on Twitter, just before locking their account, that DOA 7 was being worked on, but was then abruptly cancelled and the team disbanded. However, several sites like Event Hubs did some more digging and couldn't find any evidence of a Hiroaki Morita having ever worked at Team Ninja, and that contacting the email associated with the Twitter account resulted in an error message. This led many to believe that this news was a hoax, although no one knows for certain. In summation, Tecmo and Team Ninja made a lot of mistakes here, and instead of trying to fix them and stick around for the long haul, they seemed content with just moving on to their action games. Oh, and Dead or Alive Extreme Venus Vacation, of course, which is still getting brand new characters to this very day. Jesus. If you know of any other bouncy blunders in the video game or movie industries, the DOA movie is a good candidate.
It's showtime!
Dad! Not now, I'm in my underwear.
Oh my god.
Let me know in the comments below or become a big boss over on my Patreon. See you next time, and thanks for watching!